Welcome to Military Matters, hosted by retired Major Ricky Harold and Lieutenant Colonel George Fleck. This is a show about, for, and everything regarding veterans. We're all about the issues impacting the lives of our military brothers and sisters, and our mission is to always be insightful, factual, and thought-provoking. 10
Welcome to Military Matters. This is Ricky Harold speaking to our listeners out there today. One of the things I wanted to talk about was what's going on in the Caribbean and the U.S. military buildup off the coast of Venezuela, and why is it important to Americans to kind of understand what's going on. And it really goes back to the implementation of the Monroe Doctrine, which goes back to President Monroe in the early 19th century in regards to foreign adversaries and foreign forces interfering with the Western Hemisphere's geopolitical activities, and the United States took upon itself to make sure that the Caribbean was a secure and safe location for all military and civilian naval forces within the Caribbean without being obstructed by foreign adversaries. So it's called the Monroe Doctrine because it said that if you're in South America, Central America, or the Caribbean, that area is a purveyance of Americans, for Americans, by Americans, and only Americans. And that means Central, South, and North Americans only. So people from Africa, Middle East, China, or Europe were not authorized to be in that area without our permission. And that was the ongoing prevalence of military activity for almost 150 years. And that was pretty much the case until the 1950s and 1960s, when the United States changed the way it ran its government in 1947, when it created the National Defense Act, which created the Department of Defense, which just recently got changed back to its original name, the Department of War. Why is that important? It's important because what's going on in the southern portion of South America and along the Venezuelan coast is we've got a regime, a socialist regime. There's actually three socialist regimes in the Caribbean. Obviously, one of them is Cuba, which is a communist. We have Nicaragua, which is a socialist communist country. And then we have Venezuela, which was a socialist country, but now has become a narco-communist country, which is even worse than Cuba in reality, because at least in Cuba, they try to take care of their people a little bit. But in Venezuela, it's just a bunch of criminals who are running the country. They had an election last year. Maduro lost. I mean, when he lost by a ton. He was given the opportunity to have a free and fair election. And they did have an election, even though it wasn't necessarily free or fair. But even with the obstructions and with all of the shenanigans that the Maduro communist regime did, they still lost by 75%. So in other words, about 20 to 25% of the people voted for Maduro, and 75% of the people voted for the opposition. Anyway, the point being is that he was supposed to step down and let the democratic elected government take over. Well, he refused to do that. He abrogated his authority, and now it's an illegitimate regime that's only being held by sheer power of the gun and his occupation over the military. That's the only legitimacy he has left, is a dictatorship by a military means only. Well, the United States in the past, at least in the past 20 some years, has let Hugo Chavez, he was the first socialist, and then his selected person that he wanted to take over from him, which was Nicolas Maduro. What happened was that these individuals looted and stole everything from the people and from the country of Venezuela. Like basically robber barons just stole everything that they could take. And this, you're talking the richest country in South America became the poorest country in South America in a matter of 20 years. They literally raped and stole everything that they could. And they're still in the process of stealing what little is left. And the people are starving, literally starving to death. And in the United States, under the current administration, said, this shall not pass. We are going to implement the Monroe Doctrine with the implementation by the current president. So it's called a Trump, actually like a new Monroe Doctrine, but implemented by Trump. And Trump saying that the foreign forces that are inside of Venezuela, they have to get out. And anybody who's operating as a narco terrorist either leaves or they die in place. And this is what's going on in the country. And the United States has now put a naval embargo. Any ships that are crossing out of Venezuela that are not legitimate commercial ships, like these tankers are taking, these 3 tankers they've taken so far, those were unflagged, unlicensed, and unauthorized transport, basically theft of Venezuelan oil for the purposes of enriching the Maduro cartel of individuals who are nothing more than narco terrorists. And the rest of the cargo that's being left is to pay national debts that Maduro has incurred with foreign countries like the People's Republic of China and the Iranian Republic and the Syrian Republic and the Republic of Russia. So what's going on is that any commerce that is being effectuated by the Venezuelan illegitimate government is only to pay debts that they owe for military material and military assistance and food products for the rich and powerful within Venezuela, and everybody else is left to starve on their own. Whatever little bit of food or fuel or electricity they have to get it from Brazil, or they have to get it from Colombia or Guyana. Interesting to mention, the country of Guyana, Maduro has said that they're not a legitimate country. He's going to invade them and take them. So Guyana has asked the United Kingdom and the United States to protect them from an invasion by Venezuela. So a lot of negative things are going on in that area, and the U.S. has sanctioned Venezuela to almost the same maximum sanction as Russia. But in this regard, we're actually trying to effectuate a transfer of power from Maduro to a legitimately elected democratic government. And in the sense, we have, as the president's already spoken, we already have special forces, we have CIA assets and all kinds of military and semi-military organizations within Venezuela setting up the operations so that when the overturn of the Maduro government actually occurs, then the legitimate government can step in and try to pick up the pieces because, they've pretty much looted everything that there is to keep. So the people who are currently running the country, the smart ones are getting their families and getting their ill-gotten gains and getting out, and the rest of them are just hunkering down and hoping that the United States won't invade. And that doesn't look very promising because President Trump has already said if Maduro doesn't leave on his own, he'll be leaving by the U.S. military. So one way or the other, it looks to me, sometime either by the end of this month or no later than the end of next month, this guy's date certain is going to be out of Venezuela one way or the other. Yeah. So Grady, you got any questions you want to ask?
Not so far. It's all good stuff.
Okay.
We had Jay Hatter check in online, and so they may have some questions, but I'll let you know.
Okay. So what we're doing right now is we're setting up the men and material for an invasion if we have to. We'd prefer, the U.S. government would prefer that the cartels and all of the bad actors that are currently in Venezuela get the flock out and leave before we have to permanently remove them by military force. We'd rather not do that. We'd rather give them the chance to gracefully get the heck out. And if they don't, we will ungracefully take them out. So that's kind of where we're at right now. We also talk about what's the other issue that's going on. The narco traffickers are currently, I mean, we're not, when we talk about we've blown up about 20 or 25 of these boats. Well, that's just a small tip of the iceberg there, because there's normally hundreds of these boats that traverse the Caribbean going to certain countries that have very lax capabilities to secure their own borders or their own islands. And so the narco traffickers use these coastlines to effectuate the transfer of their narcotics into Europe and into the United States via the Dominican Republic, via Dominica, via Cuba, via certain other countries that they say they're trying to stop the narcotics trade, but they're really bought off. And we all know who they are, and they all know who they are too. The thing is that what the U.S. government's saying is that we're done talking and we're done confiscating these drugs, and then trying to go through the process of legally and jurisdictionally and through the judicial system processing, because the narco traffickers already gauged that. That's already part of their operating process. Is they're going to lose by 5 to 8% of their product to the Coast Guard or to the U.S. Narcotics or to the the Department of Drug Enforcement Agency and stuff like that. That's already baked into the cake. So that's just part of their model. But it's not stopping them from putting out 95 or 94% of their product into the United States based upon their travel arrangements that they have with these foreign countries. Trump has already said when he came into a second term that now is over. We're no longer going to confiscate this stuff. We're just going to blow it up. So what that has done is about 70 to 80% of the people who would normally transfer, transport, and bring into the United States via ships or by land travel or by aircraft, 80% of these people said, I don't mind making a lot of money and I don't mind even getting arrested, but I certainly mind getting killed. And therefore, they're saying they're not going to do that. So that's done for Venezuela and for a small part Colombia has put them in a bad bind, because the products that they've already guaranteed to the drug dealers in the United States, they can't effectuate and bring in their product. So that's going to bring in their own problems with their own people, because there's always going to be somebody out there willing to put their life on the line to make a few dollars. But for the most part, the people who are really smart and the people who are really rich aren't going to forfeit their life for a few pesos or a few dollars or for a few euros. They're just not going to do that. And that kind of makes sense on a humane rating. But in reality, what's going on is the game that we've played for the last 45, 50 years in the Gulf of America, which he changed the name, and the Caribbean is no longer operating as current procedures that have gone on for the last 50 years. He said that's over with, because we all know that the war on drugs has not worked, because it's really not a war on drugs. It's just an interdiction program that only gets 5 to 8%. Well, now it's a real war on drugs, because now we're just blowing them out of the water, and anybody that comes in, we're arresting them. And if they refuse to be arrested, we just take them out. And that's how it is. And that's what's going on. And I want the American people to understand why this is happening. It's because the current administration has said, we have a war on drugs, and we already know who the people that bringing the drugs in. It's it's very well documented. We have all kinds of surveillance, satellite surveillance, human intelligence, and naval surveillance that shows where these guys are. It's not a matter of finding them or interdicting them. It's a matter of stopping the trade. And how do you stop the trade? You start blowing them out of the water. That pretty much ends the trade. It happened 100 years ago, back when we're talking about the Teddy Roosevelt. And then after Teddy Roosevelt, we had a couple of preceding presidents that pretty much effectuated the same program that Teddy Roosevelt did. Said, if you bring in illegal narcotics or you bring in illegal products, we are going to either confiscate them or we're going to blow them out of the water. And that's exactly what we did, and it stopped the trade for that 50-year period. It doesn't mean that 100% of the trade was stopped, but about 95% of it stopped. Once we stopped interdicting and once we stopped blowing stuff out of the water, like we did back in the early 20th century, then the trade just exploded because there was no deterrence that these people would understand. The only thing that they really understand is violence. I mean, not some violence, but extreme violence. If you don't use extreme violence, these people will continue to do the trade because there's, as far as they're concerned, there's no repercussions. Losing a little bit of product or losing a few people to prison, it's no big deal. The trade still goes on and the money still capitalizes their organization. So what we've done is we've changed the rules of the game back to where it used to be. You trade in narcotics, you trade in illegal weapons, you trade in illegal products, and we're going to take you off the grid. And that's the only thing that really makes deterrence work in the Caribbean. And that's part of the new implementation of our program in the Caribbean. So we're working from that assumption for the future. And anybody who thinks otherwise is just wishful thinking, or they're going back to the past, where I understand there was a lot of money to be made, and there's a lot of powerful people in the U.S. government and in industry that relied on a lot of these illegal products coming in for their own personal gain. I hate to admit that, but it's true, and that's just reality. And those people now have been put on notice that we're not just going to arrest them. We're going to confiscate everything they have. We're going to indict them, and we're going to put them in prison for the rest of their lives, which we've never done. But we are going to do it now. So the Monroe Doctrine has changed in the sense that Americans who are bringing these drugs in and Americans who are becoming rich and prosperous off of the drug trade are no longer going to be treated with kid gloves. That's just gone. That's gone. And we're taking them out at the source, not at the end product. Where that when we actually arrest drug dealers on the streets, they're just salesmen. That's all they are. They're just out there selling a product at whatever price they can get and hooking people on their drugs for how long they can hurt people or make money off of these people. Those people get arrested all the time. They do their time and they come back and they just start doing it again, unless they get old and they die and then they move on or their families get in the business. So that going after the foot soldiers in the drug trade is a whack-a-mole business, and it doesn't get you anywhere. You have to go to the source, the people who are running the program, the people who are the leaders, not the lieutenants, the captains, the industrial chiefs, the king bosses. All of these people need to be taken off the grid. And Trump has said, and the people that protect them, that's where the real money's at. We're talking about lawyers, politicians, captains of industry. These people have protected these individuals for almost a century now. And Trump says, no, that's over with. If you end up doing what you've done in the past, you're going to pay with your life, and your family is going to be destitute and out on the street. So they've made a huge change in the way they're prosecuting and the way that they're confiscating. They're not just confiscating money, they're confiscating homes and boats and cars and ships. Anything that they have in their possession is being taken away. So it's a big change in the way the government is operating now in the Caribbean and operating on U.S. soil when it comes to illicit drug trade. And we're not just talking about, we're talking primarily about Venezuela and Colombia, but one of the biggest landmass problems we have is obviously Mexico, but we're dealing with Mexico on a one-on-one basis. But the other one that people don't talk about is Canada. Oh my God, there's so much illegal trade coming across the Canadian border. We just had a raid in Michigan that took out 3.5 million pounds of cocaine. That was being run by this gal who was the maritime coordinator for the coastline on Michigan. She was the number one maritime person in charge of trade at the port, and she was not only effectuating the drug trade, but she was laundering the money to Native American casinos. It was a huge effort by the FBI and the DEA and the special forces that belong to Canada. I mean, it was a huge operation, just happened here in the last few days. And so we can't just talk about what's going on in the Caribbean. We have to talk about all of the American shores in Canada on the Pacific and the Atlantic side, as well as the Great Lakes. I mean, it's all over. It's gotten so bad that places like Traverse City in Michigan is nothing more than a huge drug smuggling city that the people there are afraid to say anything because the cartels will kill them. And now that's over with. We've sent in huge amount of federal forces to take these bad actors out. And that's currently going on as we speak. So a lot of people don't hear what's really going on when it comes to the illicit drug trade. They just rather look the other way and hope for the best. But when I tell you, when it happens to your family, when one of your family members or one of your children or grandchildren gets hooked on narcotics, it's a bad deal for the whole family. I mean, it ruins families. So, I mean, you love these people and you try to help them, but they're hooked on a product that they can't themselves get off of. And the only way you can help those people is to take the product away by whatever means that's possible. President Trump has basically said that's what we're going to do. We're not letting these people get away with murder. I mean, literally with murder and larceny and rape and big, huge transfer of human trafficking. And they use the human trafficking for drugs and for free labor and slave labor, basically, and for prostitution. So, I mean, it's a big organization with a lot of tentacles and, a lot of that drug money. And it goes into political parties that operate along the shorelines of the United States. And it, I'm not saying it's all one party because it's not, but there is one party that is predominantly bought off by a lot of illicit trade, and we talked that was a small D party, but there are people in our party too that are bought off. Not saying they're not, but for the most part, the Democratic Party has been bought and paid for by the drug trade, and nobody will actually deny that. They just look the other way and say, well, you can't get rid of drugs, so let's just legalize it. And we've seen how that worked out. Try the state of Oregon. They legalized all narcotics, and they saying that, oh, by the way, that's a humane thing to do, and then the drug traffic will be very, very minimal. It just went to the opposite. They went from like 3% of the population under narcotics to about 10%. So there's 3 times the amount of people doing illegal narcotics because it became okay to do it. It was illegal to do it. So you weren't going to get prosecuted by the state or the county or the city. Only the feds were going to go after you, and they have a limited amount of resources. So, and because they realized that after a large percentage of the population was now doing drugs, which they swore would not happen, then they all had to backtrack and they've rescinded those laws allowing for free drug trades in Oregon. You talk about permission and a lot of people out there who are actually doing permissive things, and they think that they're being humane and they're being helpful, and they think that their whole program is compassion. It's not compassion at all. It's allowing people to do bad things to themselves and families on a grand scale to the point where it destroys the society. The fabric of society gets destroyed by these organizations. And if you don't root it out, not just mow the lawn, but pull the roots out and go after the people who are profiting and making huge asset gains from these organizations, it'll continue on in perpetuity forever, and the society will eventually disintegrate. You go back in history, and most of the grand empires and societies and civilizations that all were very strong and then one day disappeared, it's because of the same thing that we're talking about here. It was not necessarily drugs, but it was power and corruption and greed and taxation and theft and prostitution and slave labor and all that. That's what destroyed these great empires, is from the inside out, not from the outside in. I mean, when they got invaded by the outsiders, because it was just a shell of itself. It couldn't even protect its own borders. And we're getting close to the fact that we can't protect our own borders. I mean, under the last administration, we let in, nobody knows how many people we let in, but it's at least 10 to 15 million people that we let in, and of which a lot of the people, they don't even know who they are, because there's over 2 million that the government knows that has crossed the border. They have no clue who they are, of which the current administration says at least 100,000 of them are violent criminals. Found something like 250 to 300 known terrorists that they've already captured and reincarcerated. That's exactly what they've currently taken in, which is only a small portion of what's still out there. But it doesn't take a lot of people to commit crimes. I mean, in a small community, 2 to 4 people can be 80% of the crime in a small community. And then as soon as you take those 2 to 4 people out, crime all of a sudden goes away. Well, think that on a massive scale. All you need is a few thousand people to run a massive drug organization and destroy societies from the inside out. And that's unfortunately where we're at. And we're working on trying to fix that. And for a lot of people, they either want to deny it, or they want to look the other way, or they don't want to accept reality. And I'm afraid that we've had to change our whole thought process and our education process. We have to educate people that tolerating drug use is a road to perdition. Like they say, the fastest way to hell is with good intentions, and that's exactly what they think they're doing. They think they're helping these poor souls out when all they're doing is condemning them to an awful death. But they don't see that because it doesn't personally affect them. It's just their thought process. And unfortunately, that's not a winner. That's a loser. So we have to go from there.
Do you support our U.S. military? Well, imagine it took less than a minute to salute our veterans, and a little bit of your time was the only deciding factor. I'm Marine Corps veteran Ryan Gershman with Concerned Veterans for America. We're a nonprofit of veterans for all Americans. We push proposed policy and current bills affecting us all. When you go to cv4a.org, you simply sign a letter of support for proposed bills, and we then forward those letters to your federal representatives. It takes only a few clicks to stand up for those who served and your fellow Americans. You can even call me, Ryan Gershman, directly at 775-531 with your questions. As a thank you, you'll also get access to register for special events in the Great Basin area for making a difference. Go to www.cv4a.org and learn more about Concerned Veterans for America.
Welcome back to Military Matters. I was talking about what's going on with the Trump and Trump's implementation of the Monroe Doctrine and how that's affecting the United States and how it interacts with the drug boat interdictions and the drug war that we're pursuing under the new administration. But one of the things I also wanted to talk about for just a few minutes here is I was just at the Veterans Administration here in Reno. And one of the biggest problems at the Reno Veterans Administration is that lack of personnel. They don't have the people that they need. They don't have the staffing that they need. It's not that the people there that aren't doing a really good job, because they are. They're doing the best job they can. They can't keep the doctors, they can't keep the nurses, they can't keep the high value technicians because they're not paying them. Or a lot of them say it's not even the pay, it's the staffing. They have offices where they're supposed to have 10 people, they have 3. Well, anybody knows that 3 people can't do 10 people's jobs. And if they try to just keep the normal balance of operations, you're going to burn those 3 people out to the point they're going to quit. Then you got nobody in the office and you got no service whatsoever by the Veterans Administration. That's what Reno's telling us. I was told that today. We can't even keep technicians in the VA because they're not hiring, and they have positions, but the VA is not hiring staffing to place in those positions. Or they can't fill the positions because the staff pay is so low for the position that, in other words, they're asking for physicians, doctors with a lot of certifications, but they want to pay them the minimum wage for entry-level doctors. And of course, they can't take the job because it doesn't pay them enough money. I mean, they can go out there and work part-time, or they can be a concierge doctor for 5 or 10 days and make same amount of work that you have to do for a whole month's worth of work at the VA. Well, obviously, they're not going to do that, though they would prefer to work at the Veterans Administration. They prefer to help veterans. They would prefer to work with professional people also, but they can't because the pay is so low. They haven't upgraded the pay scale for the medical profession in the last 10 years.
Oh, you have got to be kidding me.
And so it's been under, I guess it started at the end of the Obama administration, where they started effectuating the VA, and they just started when they let people go, they just attrition. They just didn't fill the positions. And so toward the end of the Obama administration, in the mid 2000s, like 2016, they just started letting people go. And what that does is more people, you have to do twice as much work for half as much pay. And they hadn't given them pay increases at all. I mean, they've given all they got, because under Obama, they didn't even, for 8 years under Obama, the VA and anybody in the federal government received zero. I don't mean 1%, not half of it, received zero cost of living increase for 8 years. It was terrible. And after that, when the Trump first administration of Trump, they came in and started implementing cost of living increases, but the Office of Personnel Management never increased the pay to allocate for new people coming on board, which effectuated when people retired or got tired of working in the federal government, those positions remained empty. So they weren't being filled. And as more people left, staff shortages got worse and worse, obviously, to the point where there's whole departments that are ghost towns. I mean, there may be somebody who comes in as a contract worker that comes in for a few days and does some work, but for all intents and purposes, they're empty departments. So this is not just Reno, this is all over the VA. Some places are worse, but Reno has been a sterling example of top-notch talent. But in the last few years, in the last 3 years, it has gone down drastically to the point where even the people who have been there for 20 some years, they're retiring. They're saying that they're being overworked and underpaid. And like I said, they haven't got a pay scale increase for 10 years. Well, last I looked, the price of beef and the price of sugar and the price of peaches in the last 10 years has gone up, and gone up quite a bit, like 15 to 30 to sometimes 50 or 80%. You can't keep living on wages that are 10 years in the past. That's like people, well, the price of an apple is a nickel. Well, now the price of an apple is $1.50. So you're not going to be able to buy an apple for a nickel, but you're getting paid at the nickel grade rate. And that doesn't push people to come work for the federal government when they can't make people. It's awful to think about people starting to work for the government and they're on welfare benefits or they're on SNAP benefits because they don't make enough money working for the government to be able to pay for the food on their table. And this is kind of where they're at right now. And that is just awful. I mean, the amount of money the government wastes, the government just pushes down the road, not accountable. I mean, look at the situation in Minnesota where they stole billions of dollars, not millions, folks, billions of dollars. And the state government just looked the other way, said, so there's a little graft, a little corruption. That just happens in every way. It's not a big deal. And their own Governor Walz said, I've got a handle on this. We know about this $1 billion and we're working to take care of it. And he's been the governor for 8 years. And this graft and corruption started the same year that he became governor. And here's the bad part. He got up there and said, I'm taking care of this $1 billion graft. The feds just got up on TV and said, we just scratched the surface. It's not $1 billion. It's $9 billion we know of. And it looks like more like 18 billion when we get all said and done. So the governor who's going through this mea culpa, well, I'm going to take care of business for this $1 billion, doesn't even know how much money has been stolen or lost because he's an idiot. And when you have, people who are so oblivious to the realities of their office, they have no clue what's going on, or they don't care what's going on, or worse, they look the other way because it's in their political expediency to look the other way. I mean, I'm telling you right now, the Attorney General of the state of Minnesota, his name is Eielson. He's as corrupt as a day is long. That guy, you mark my words, in 3 years or less, that guy will be in federal prison for the rest of his natural life because he has been bought and paid, and they have him on tape for being bought and bribed for political reasons. So, I mean, if your attorney general, who's a person who's the top cop, is already bought off, you can imagine how many other people in law enforcement or in the legal profession are also on the hook for a lot of dubious and unlawful things, looking the other way. And there's probably quite a few of state judges and prosecutors who are in the same boat. So I wouldn't be surprised if you see a lot of prosecutions of politicians and political bigwigs in that state. There's going to be an earthquake the size that they haven't seen in 100 years. And that's just one small example of the graft that's going on. And they say that the graft of your taxpayers' dollars has just gone nutso. And I'm not just the only person talking about this, but you look at the situation where we can't even pay for our doctors and nurses, but we can throw billions of dollars away to crooks and fraudsters and don't care. But we can't pay even a salary increase for the cost of living and the salary increase that these people have to live in today's society. When we talk about affordability, half the people say, yeah, they can afford, they can scratch by. The other half say they're barely making it. Why? Because the government, by the way, has been spending our taxpayer money so fast and so furious that we are deficit spending not billions, but trillions of dollars every year. Every single year, trillions of dollars are in debt. We're spending money we don't have. And we're now at 36 trillion, going to 37 trillion. And It's an unimaginable amount of money. $1 trillion is not, you as an individual couldn't even conceive of what $1 trillion is. That's 1,000 billion. And 1,000 billion is 10,000 trillion. I mean, we're 10,000 million. I mean, we're talking an insurmountable idea of money. $36 trillion. You know, you could go from the earth with $100 bills, put it on the ground floor, and go to Saturn and back about 8 times. You know, that's how much money we're talking about. It's an inconceivable amount of money, and you've got to you got to stop spending money you don't have. I mean, that's the fastest way to ruination of a nation is to spend money they don't have. The last countries that did that turned into despot fascist organizations like the Weimar Republic of Germany, started spending money they didn't have, where it took a wheelbarrow of money to buy a loaf of bread. Well, you could be in that same situation if we stopped paying on the debt. But right now, the debt for the United States is $1 trillion. So this unimaginable amount of money we're talking about is what we owe just on the interest. We're not talking about $1 on the principal. We're not paying any of it down. We're just adding more to it. And that's why one of the reasons that the doctors and nurses and technicians at the Veterans Administration have not received a pay increase for the cost of their profession in the last 10 years, because we're paying an enormous amount of our money that would go to pay for salaries to pay the debt. And people don't understand that because it's such an inconceivably large amount of money. And we're in a world of hurt. We're going to have to figure a way to dig ourselves out. And I'm hoping that some people way smarter on the pay scale that I am, or way smarter in the educational level than I am, can figure out a usable, feasible, and workable way to lower our debt. Because if they don't, our country is destined for going into a bad, bad place, because the rest of the world will not be paying for our debt. And our debt is tremendous amount of money. And you look at some of the countries that have tried to resolve their debts, and it took them decades, like Japan. Japan was in such a bad place that it took them 20 years just to get back to where they were in the 90s. And they only recently got out of their and it took a long time to do that. It took a whole generation of people willing to sacrifice to do that. And now their problem is, like the rest of the world, is they have a depopulation problem. They have more old people than young people, because young people said, well, I don't get enough money to pay for myself. Why would I get married and have another mouth to feed, or have a child to bring in who I can't feed? So young people aren't procreating and having children because they can't afford to feed themselves, let alone feed a family of 1 or 2. And so they're just not having children at all. When you have zero population, more older people, till they die. And if you have good medicine and good medical care, people live a lot longer. And of course, we all know the last 2 or 3 years of people's life is where they consume the most amount of medical attention. There won't even be enough people, technicians or doctors or nurses, to even take care of the dying population, let alone the living population. So, and that's where Japan's at right now. They finally got out of debt, but they paid the price of a whole generation that has disappeared. It's too expensive to live. And we're headed in the exact same place. We're just 30 years behind them. So we're heading in the same direction. And if we don't stop now, the pain won't be on me and you. Pain is going to be on our children and grandchildren, and they're the ones that are going to pay the piper, and it's going to be bad news for them. So we all need to be looking forward to the future in a positive way by helping them out, by stop spending money we don't have, making sure that the population that we do have, we service them properly, and that we have a government that's receptive to the people and not to the movers and shakers, because they don't care. They're going to make sure that their personal lives and their families are taken care of, and the hell with everybody else. Well, problem with that theory is that the rest of us are all part of society, and so are they. You cannot separate yourself from society. Even the doom preppers realize that it takes more than one or two people to survive off the grid. You have to have a whole group of people to make living off the grid work. And these rich people, they don't even know how to plant a carrot, let alone milk a cow or anything like that. They're not in any shape. I mean, you can burn oil and you can melt gold, but you can't eat it and you can't drink it. And so therefore, you find out real quickly that in a society that has broken down, only two things that matter: guns and bullets, power. People that have power are the people who have the strength, and that's a barbaric society, and you don't want to regress. As a civilization, you don't want to regress to the strongest and the bulliest people to control society, because it's a never-ending losing proposition. That's how whole civilizations, one day they're here and the next day they're gone. And we want to make sure that the United States at least lasts for another 250 years. Would be just half a millennium. Would be nice. I'd be satisfied if the United States just survives for another 250 years. But at the rate that the current government administration is going in the last 50 years, it's been a terrible downward spiral, and only getting worse. The good thing is that we've got people today that want to change that and want to make it better. They realize, they see the writing on the wall and they want to fix it. Let's hope they do fix it. Let's hope they do get the support. But they only get the support from people like you. If you go out there and raise your voice, and not just your voice, but your actions, you have to go out. People say voting. Votes are only as good as the people who count the votes. But if you don't vote, then it doesn't matter who counts, because whoever is in charge of already winning. And if they're in charge and they're doing all the nefarious bad stuff, and we're not throwing them out of office, then we're part of the problem too. And when you start electing people who are some of the highest offices, who say that I'm the chief person in charge of law enforcement for Minnesota or for Virginia, but my ideations are, I want to kill my opponents, and I want to see their children die in front of them. And we're electing these people. That says something about society. If you think about it, that's really gone to the really bad part of society when we start allowing people like that in positions of power. Because if that's what they say in their quiet places, can you imagine what they're doing in the public square? I mean, it's like the Lord of the Flies situation, and we don't want that. We need to stop that in its tracks, and if we don't, we're going to reap the whirlwind on that, and it's really, really bad. So let's just hope that people out there wake up and smell the coffee and start doing the right thing, because us in the military, we already know what what's right and wrong. We don't have to be told that. But we have people who are so detached from this country, they don't even know what's right and wrong. And that's a really scary place to be. So Grady, you got any questions?
Well, man, it's a fascinating topic. I was raised with law enforcement, of course, so there was always rules, growing up and everything. And I've read a lot of books, and been in clinical situations, and I've seen chemical dependency clinically, and even on the street. And as you mentioned, when your family member goes through it, that's it rips families apart.
Absolutely.
Drugs have been around for a long time. And so with what the president is doing, and that's again assuming and trusting that the intelligence that they're getting is first and foremost accurate. And so the types of drugs that are coming in, when they are for whatever reason killing our citizens, then you of course know that our leaders are going to be responsible for stepping up, or in some cases as we've experienced. Some leaders don't step up. But the fascinating thing about drugs, so for example, drugs come in all forms and sizes. And so, for example, alcohol is a drug.
Yes, it's been around, forever.
But I enjoy having a beer with you every
So
once
is
in a while.
opium. Opium's been around as long as drugs.
Yes, and all of these different forms, right? And so I read a book one time. They had a thought-provoking question. Is that that being said, drugs have been around. They come in all types of forms and types, and there are legal drugs and there are illegal drugs. And so that's where everything kind of comes to the doorstep, because the advocates for legalization of drugs, for example, in thought it had some merit because, for example, Portugal and Spain, they've done that, but they've been successful at it, where their addiction rates have went down because the access to it, you can go get it, but they keep track. And if you go and if you do too much, or if you're coming in and getting stuff too often, then you're required to go to drug education, counseling, and stuff like that to hopefully keep you off of that path that you're going down. But the thing that happened in Oregon that you mentioned, that was a travesty, and there's no surprise that when they roll out something like that it was going to be a total disaster, right? Some of the leadership on the west side of the country, in the blue states, they're not the best at managing government. So whether it's nicotine, there are, drug dealers that are, again, legal drug dealer, big pharma, and then there were the ones on the streets. And so the question that he poses, it's not why do people do drugs? That's not the question we should be asking. The question we should be asking is, what are the people that do drugs and they're still able to be functional in society, and they don't go down the road of addiction? It's that temporary moment of enjoyment, time and place type of thing. They're able to discern that. So from an educational standpoint, because you can't, for example, have a black market, okay, until you start criminalizing human behavior, right, from their personal choices.
Because there's a profit in it.
Yeah. But when you do, say, regulate it, there's not too many, so alcohol's regulated, right? Cigarettes are regulated. So you don't have too many people that are bootleggers anymore. They're out there, but, then if somebody was selling alcohol illegally, that's when you get alcohol, tobacco, firearms out there on them, right? So same type of thing. If you made the rules so strict that, hey, if you want to smoke weed, like they have dispensaries now, if you want to smoke weed, you go check it out. But we're going to keep track on it, no matter what it is, cocaine. Again, not that I advocate for it, but this is the theory. So in theory,
right,
if you say, would you like to eliminate the black market? Like people say, well, heck yeah. And then when you say, well, then you're going to have to legalize and regulate drugs the way that you do alcohol. That's the challenge. Because in theory, it's great. But then in practical application, what they found, for example, with marijuana, is that the dispensaries that open, so everything's legal beagle and everything, but then all of the government over-regulations and again, having their kind of hand in the cookie jar, it makes it impossible for the businesses to make it. And so then here comes the black market again. So even when it's legal, right, the mismanagement of the programs and the government entities, still creates that problem. So it is complex, Ricky. I mean, it seriously, it is. And you did a great job explaining everything. Really good part about the Monroe Doctrine, too. Fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, it used to be taught in school as part of your civics lesson that every child that would go through elementary school and middle school would understand it. But I don't believe they teach that stuff anymore in school. Do you?
Are you talking about like drug education or?
Well, no, I'm talking about the Monroe Doctrine or heck, they used to teach home ec and stuff. They don't even do that anymore.
Well, exactly. And as we know, there's been issues with the educational system. The 3 R's is not a big priority. It's, taking tests but hopefully things will, be better, get better the next 3 years as, Mr. Trump finishes his term.
Yeah, if he can get rid of that. People talk about the Department of Education. They don't even have a clue as to why the Department of Education was created. And just for a quick question, do you know why it was created?
Well, wasn't this was it back in 1980, somewhere around there?
Well, close. It was 1979
79,
under the Carter administration.
Right.
Carter Carter created the Department he by executive order, he created the Department of Education. And then he got Congress 1980 to congressionally approve it. And it was a sop to the Teachers Association because they wanted more money for teachers. And so by creating the Department of Education, had nothing to do with educating students, had everything to do with increasing the pay for teachers and teacher associations. And that's what it was primarily built for, was to pay teachers. Bet you didn't know that, huh? Yeah. You can look it up. You can go into the Department of Education archives and look under it's like 2 or 3 pages as to why it was created. And it all has to do with the Teachers Association and helping teachers organize and get higher pay. Nothing at all about educating students has nothing to do at all with teaching students or educating students. It has everything to do with sending money to teachers associations and raising teacher salaries and helping the administration of the school systems pay for the salaries of the administrators. That's all it's about.
You know, and again, that's a good sidebar also, you know, as far as like teachers go. You know, those teachers should be kind of like one of our most precious commodities because they are teaching our young people, right, and forging their minds.
Educators.
But they're like any avocation, there's good ones and there's bad ones. And, you know, the good ones, of course, don't make enough money. I simply think that, say, for example, if everybody knew, like teachers, you know, the bar could even be raised higher, of course. But if you knew that you could make 6 figures as a teacher, entry level, you know, you'd start getting the smartest, brightest, you know, people, you know, in there. But you know, to your point about the Department of Education, yeah, for those very special teachers that are there for the kids and understand there's different ways that kids learn and coming up with creative ways to teach them in different situations. Those types of educators should make more money, but often don't. So that's something where, again, the bureaucracy, as you mentioned, 1979, you know, became part of the process, and in the interim has, you know, totally screwed everything up, where money management, of course, has been going to the top and the people that I just mentioned and spoke about.
Well, you know, yeah, since 1979 to today, we've spent close to $1 trillion on the Department of Education, and our school teaching output for educational level for grades 1 through 12 has gone down, not up. So throwing money at teachers isn't an answer.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
It's all about teaching, like you said, those who have the desire to teach. You pay them well, and you have the minimum amount of administrators as you can. You know, you have offices throughout the United States. It doesn't matter where you go. You can go to Washoe County or Carson County or go to any state in the union, and the only people that make real money in the education are the administrators. The only ones that make money, and they make really good. They make 6-digit figures. I know. I mean, 100,000. They make $200,000-$400,000. They make the same amount of money as the president of the United States. But there's maybe in each district there may be only a handful of those people, but they're getting all the money. The teachers are getting $30,000 or $40,000 a year,
Right?
If that. But they're at the location where they're trying to educate, but all of the information and all of the textbooks and all of the training is done by the educator or by the administrators, and they just, for instance, just take a math book. They hire somebody to create a math book. They determine what's in the math book, and then they distribute that math book to the district. They get a cut. They get a cut for that. They get like a 10 or 20% kickback for that. I bet you didn't know that, did you?
Well, It's not surprising, right? It's not surprising.
Yeah. I mean, that's how it works. I mean, that's how it's been operating now for the last 50 years. We're not educating our kids. it's called the dumber down of the education system. I think a lot of people, especially a lot of rich people, because they make sure their kids don't go to public education, they go to private education. But they would rather have the masses be stupid than educated, because that way it's easier to control them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Hey, to round out the show, we had a few people kind of come in late, and I informed them. Basically, we were talking about the Monroe Doctrine and how it relates to the current naval operations in our Western Hemisphere. So, would you mind giving everybody a quick recap on that?
Sure. We currently have a flotilla down in the southern portion of the Caribbean, or northern portion of South America, whichever geographic area you want to talk about. And this is south of the Gulf of America. It used to be called the Gulf of Mexico. There's an embargo on Venezuela, and there's a partial embargo on Colombia, and there's a total embargo on all narcotics trafficking in the Caribbean. And we're using ships, naval ships and naval aircraft to take out these illegal traffickers of narcotics, narco traffickers. We used to do that with interdiction with the Coast Guard, but unfortunately, you only get 5 to 8% of the people. It's just part of the operating cost of the narco trade to lose 5 or 8% of their product. Right. It's just built into their operations, and now the new president, under the Trump Monroe Doctrine, is that we're taking them out. We're taking them off the grid. We're no longer telling them that, hey, you might lose your product, you might get arrested, you might do a little bit of time. No, you're going to lose all your product, and you're going to lose your life. That's what we used to do in the 19th and early 20th century under Theodore Roosevelt and the preceding presidents, and including FDR at the beginning of his administration. They did the interdiction and the lawful destruction of narcotics and illegal contraband all across the Caribbean. And then we stopped doing it right before the beginning of World War II, and haven't really done the necessary work that has to be done to stop majority of the trade, because people would rather do something different than, it doesn't matter if you get $1 million if you're dead, So yeah. So it has a real deterrent factor.
So how does the Monroe Doctrine equate to, or are they using the same doctrine to enforce when they're boarding those oil tankers and taking those? Is that the same application of law?
Yeah. Okay, they don't need to sink them. They just board the ships, take them back to the States, and confiscate the oil and sell off the ships. Yeah. I mean, these are sanctioned. These ships are already sanctioned. They don't even fly a flag. Yeah. I mean, back in the bad old days, you used to fly a skull and crossbones. They don't even fly that. They don't have any flag at all, and they've already been identified by the maritime authorities that these people are traveling with illegal contraband, be it oil or narcotics or whatever they're transporting, and it's all for illegal trade, because it's not sanctioned, it's not authorized, it's not even taxed, it's not even tracked. Yeah. So, and it's pure profit for the cartels.
And I think I saw earlier there may be another one, a third one, or something like that. I thought I saw the president and Hegseth on there talking about something. So that may have had something.
Correct. They've already boarded a third ship.
There you go.
But what they've done by taking out the small boats, it's so what we've only taken out maybe 20 or 25 boats. But what's really is happening, and it's not the boats that we've blown up, it's all the boats that are still ashore saying they're not going, because they are not going to forfeit their life for the narcotics. It's not worth their lives. So think of it like this. So you're a bad guy. You're a soldier for the narcotics, and they tell you need to take this narcotics out there. Hell, take a couple of these illegals with you to help you offload and unload the narcotics. And they say, oh, by the way, you've got an 80% chance of dying. Good luck.
Yeah,
you're not going to get a lot of people who signing up for that.
Yeah, recruitment's going to go down, on that there for sure.
Well,
Sure.
the recruitment that didn't go down are already in Davy Jones' locker. So the ones who don't care are dead already, and the ones that do care aren't signing up or saying to hell with that.
Yeah,
They're
exactly.
disappearing like the rats on a sinking ship. So, and
Exactly.
literally these ships are sinking. I mean, literally sinking. So it has a real deterrent effect. It tells people that we're not messing around anymore. We're taking them out. And so it's the product that, and you got to remember, these organizations are based upon selling stuff. They're like any organization. They make money by selling their product. If they stop selling their product, they don't make any money, right? Here's the twist. If you've already obligated a product to people who have already given you a down payment, and now you can't produce the product, then these people have a tendency to forfeit your life. I mean, it's not like, hey, it's a bad debt, I'll write it off. No, they come in there and they cut you up into small pieces and put you in a wood chipper. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it sounds like a series on Netflix now.
Yeah, except it's real.
Yeah, right. But that's all I got for you, Ricky. Comment from one of the listeners, basically
Okay.
talking about the narcos. He said that they're basically pushing an item that could harm the citizens of the United States. And
Correct.
they being our military, need to do everything that they can to stop the flow and disregard what a few crybabies want, was his ending remark. So I think we agree
I don't
with
really
that.
care about, by the way, those crybabies, when it happens to their family immediately, they change their tune 180 degrees.
Ain't that the truth?
Yep. When the narco butchers come to their door, they all of a sudden become converts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. So that's all I got. I
works.
think great show. I learned a couple things. It's always good when an old guy like me learns a couple things. And
I hear you. I'm glad it was a productive show, and everybody learned a little bit of history here.
your first remote podcast.
That's right.
You
It's
got it
my
under-
very first remote podcast.
You got it under your belt. See. So we'll get to work on the editing and stuff like that. We'll get this posted. But it doesn't look like there's any other questions everybody has. So yeah.
Cool. All right.
All right. Well, here we go.
Well, Brady, I appreciate it. And
Go ahead.
I appreciate it. And we'll talk soon.